My name is Melissa, and I had just turned 18 when my life took a wild turn. Let me paint you a picture of my family. On the surface, we seemed like a normal family. Dad worked hard, and Mom stayed home. I had a little sister, Emma, who was 13 years younger than me. Dad was a big shop manager at a company that belonged to my maternal grandmother. Grandma was a real go-getter. She started with a chain of laundromats and then expanded into making household chemicals and detergents for laundries. When she decided to retire, she offered the business to Mom, but Mom wasn't interested. So Dad stepped up and took over the company. That's when things started to get complicated. I remember the day everything fell apart. I was in my room, trying to focus on my homework, when I heard Mom screaming at Dad downstairs. "You're nothing but a loser, Jacob. This is my house, my family's business. You should be grateful I even let you run it." Things got worse over the next few weeks. Mom and Dad barely spoke to each other, and when they did, it usually ended in a shouting match. I tried to keep Emma distracted, but even at 5, she knew something was wrong. Then came the day that changed everything. I came home from school to find Dad in the living room with a suitcase at his feet. "Dad," my voice cracked, "what's going on?" He walked over to me and pulled me into a tight hug. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I can't stay here anymore. It's not good for anyone." I felt like I couldn't breathe. But what about Emma? What about me? Dad pulled back, his eyes shiny with unshed tears. "I love you both so much. Never forget that. But sometimes love isn't enough." He kissed my forehead and then walked over to Emma, who was watching us with wide, confused eyes. He knelt and hugged her tightly. "Be good for your big sister, okay, pumpkin?" And just like that, he was gone. The door closed behind him with a finality that left me feeling hollow. Mom came home an hour later, and when I told her Dad had left, she didn't seem surprised. She just nodded, like she'd been expecting it. "Good riddance," she muttered. "Mom." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "How can you say that?" She turned to me, her eyes hard. "Your father cheated on me, Melissa, multiple times." I couldn't take it anymore. That night, as I lay in bed, I could hear Mom on the phone in her room. She was laughing, sounding happier than I'd heard her in months. I wondered who she was talking to, but I was too exhausted to care. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, Mom dropped another bombshell on us. She announced one morning over breakfast, "I have some news. I'm getting married." I nearly choked on my cereal. "What, Mom? Dad's only been gone for 2 months." She waved her hand dismissively. "Sometimes true love comes unexpectedly, Melissa. You'll understand when you're older." Kevin moved in a week later. He was okay, I guess, tall and good-looking in that generic way that makes people say, "Oh, he seems nice." But something about him rubbed me the wrong way from the start. He made an effort with Emma, playing games with her and helping her with her homework, but with me, it was like I barely existed. Meanwhile, changes were happening at the company too. Mom had taken over after Dad left, and she brought Kevin to work with her. Mom and Kevin always seemed to make a good team, huddled together and discussing business strategies. I tried to focus on my own life, school, friends, and the usual teenage stuff, but it was hard to ignore the nagging feeling that I was becoming invisible in my own family. Things reached a breaking point when Mom and Kevin announced they were opening a new branch of the company in another city. "We're moving," Mom told me one evening. "It's a great opportunity for the business. As for you, Kevin and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if you stay here." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Stay here without you?" "It's just that the new house won't have much space," she explained quickly, "and you're almost done with school. It wouldn't make sense to transfer now, right before your exams." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "So where am I supposed to live, on the street?" "Don't be dramatic, Melissa," Mom scolded. "You'll stay with your grandmother. She's already agreed to it." I stormed off to my room, slamming the door behind me. As I lay on my bed, hot tears of anger and hurt streaming down my face, I couldn't help but wonder when I had become such an inconvenience to my mother. The next few weeks were a blur of packing boxes and tearful goodbyes, not from me, but from Emma, who didn't want to leave her friends. I helped her pack, trying to put on a brave face for her sake. Will you come visit us? She asked, her big brown eyes full of tears. I hugged her tightly. Of course I will. You can't get rid of me that easily. The day they left, I stood on the porch with Grandma, watching as the moving van pulled away. Mom gave me a quick hug. Kevin nodded awkwardly, and then they were gone, taking Emma with them. Living with Grandma wasn't as bad as I'd feared. She was cool in her way, giving me space when I needed it, but always there with a cup of tea and a listening ear when I wanted to talk. Still, it wasn't home. My 19th birthday came around faster than I expected. I woke up that morning feeling strange. I should have been excited, but all I felt was emptiness. Mom called, of course. Happy birthday, sweetie. Her voice was bright, almost too cheery. I'm sorry we can't be there. Work's just crazy right now. We'll celebrate when we visit next month, okay? I knew we wouldn't. They hadn't visited once since they left. Sure, Mom sounded great, but Grandma must have sensed my mood because she went all out. She let me invite a few friends over, ordered my favorite food, and even baked a cake herself. For a few hours, I almost forgot about everything else. The next morning, Grandma called me into her home office. She had a serious look on her face that made my stomach clench. Sit down, Melissa, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. We need to talk. Oh God, I thought, she's kicking me out. Where am I going to go? But then she smiled, reached into her desk drawer, and pulled out a small folder. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Open it. I did, and nearly dropped it when I realized what I was looking at. Grandma, is this? She nodded, her eyes twinkling. The company is yours now, Melissa. I see potential in you, kiddo. You've got a good head on your shoulders, and I know you'll do right by the business. Grandma said, her face serious as she continued, but Mom and Kevin, they're running a branch of the company. The main company, the heart of it all, that's yours now. I sat there stunned. I am barely 19 and the owner of a multi-million-dollar company. It felt like a dream, or maybe a nightmare. I didn't know what to say. Grandma reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll give it your all. Still in shock, I nodded. I will. I promise. Grandma leaned back, looking satisfied. Good. Now I've got one more piece of advice for you, and I want you to listen carefully. I leaned in, hanging on her every word. Call your father. There's more to that story than you know. Talk to him. Take him on as a consultant if you want, but hear him out. It took me a week to work up the courage to call Dad. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown. When I saw him, my heart clenched. He looked older and tired, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. There was an awkward silence, and then suddenly everything came pouring out. The divorce, Mom's remarriage, the move, Grandma's gift. Dad listened, his face a mix of emotions. When I finished, Dad took a deep breath. Melissa, there's something you need to know about the divorce. And then he told me everything, how Mom had never respected him, constantly nagging and putting him down, how she called him a loser and made him feel worthless, how after one particularly bad fight, he'd gotten drunk and made the biggest mistake of his life. I cheated on her, he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. I regretted it immediately, but your mother used it against me. She threatened to sue, to take everything. She demanded I leave, give her all the property, and leave you kids. She even wanted alimony. I sat there stunned. This didn't sound like the mother I knew or thought I knew. Why didn't you fight it? Dad's eyes met mine, full of sadness and love. Because of you and Emma. I didn't want you to go through a messy public divorce. I thought it would be easier this way. As we talked, I felt a weight lifting off my chest. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had my dad back. Before we left, I took a deep breath and asked, how would you feel about helping me with the company as a consultant? The smile that spread across his face was answer enough. The months flew by in a whirlwind of studying, exams, and late-night cram sessions. Before I knew it, I was standing on the stage at my high school graduation, diploma in hand. Grandma was in the audience, beaming with pride. Mom and Kevin were conspicuously absent, but I had learned not to expect much from that side of the family. As summer rolled in, I threw myself into college applications with Grandma's encouragement and Dad's long-distance support. I set my sights high. When the acceptance letters started rolling in, I could hardly believe it, but the real shocker came when I got the financial aid package for my top choice, a full ride. I stared at the letter in disbelief, my heart racing. Grandma beamed with excitement and pulled me into a hug. I knew you could do it, kiddo. All those late nights and competitions paid off. I had chosen to major in business management, thinking it was the smartest move since I now had a company to run. The idea still felt surreal, but I was determined to make Grandma proud. To celebrate my college acceptance, Grandma insisted on throwing a small party for just the two of us. We had some fancy takeout and a bottle of sparkling cider. Grandma wasn't about to let me drink champagne, even though I was legally an adult now. We were halfway through our meal when the doorbell rang. Grandma frowned, clearly not expecting anyone. "I'll get it," I said, setting down my fork. I opened the door and my stomach dropped. There, looking annoyed and impatient, stood my mother and Kevin. Before I could say a word, they brushed past me and entered the house. Mom didn't waste any time with pleasantries. "Melissa, we need to talk about the company now." I watched in stunned silence as Mom launched into a tirade. She didn't even glance my way or ask about graduation or college. It was as if I wasn't even there. "Why can't we access the main accounts?" she demanded. "And why are you blocking the transfer of capital to our subsidiary?" Grandma's eyes narrowed. "Because it's not your decision to make anymore, Teresa. The company belongs to Melissa now. She's the one who will decide its future and manage its finances." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. After Grandma's revelation about the company, I saw a series of emotions flicker across Mom's face: shock, anger, and then calculation. Suddenly, her whole attitude changed. "Melissa, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I've missed you so much. Why don't you come live with us?" I blinked, taken aback by the sudden shift. Mom stepped closer, reaching out as if to touch my arm. I instinctively stepped back. "We've settled in so nicely in the new city. We have a beautiful house, and there's a room just for you. We could set up a desk and get you a new computer for your studies and work." "No, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "I'm happy here. I have my friends, my school, and Grandma needs me." Mom's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Well, if that's the issue, we could always move back here. We could live in our old house, just like before. Wouldn't that be nice?" I shook my head. "It's not about the house, Mom. It's everything." I saw the anger building in her eyes, barely contained. Before she could speak, I decided to ask the question that had been burning inside me for months. "Mom, why did you divorce Dad?" She stiffened, caught off guard. "Well, your father, he cheated on me multiple times. I was tired of it. He abandoned us for his mistress and didn't even pay alimony." "That's not true," I said. "Dad told me everything. There was only one time, and it was because of how you treated him. He didn't abandon us. You kicked him out, and he's been paying alimony regularly." Mom's face twisted with rage. "How dare you? You ungrateful little brat. You have no right to meddle in my personal life. Everything here belongs to me, and I decide who lives where." Grandma, who had been quietly observing this exchange, finally stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but it carried a steely edge I had never heard before. "That's quite enough, Teresa," she said. "You seem to have forgotten a few key points. This house, the company, belongs to me, not you. I gave the company to Melissa because I trust her judgment far more than I trust yours. Right now, I think it's time for you to leave." I watched as Grandma firmly ushered Mom and Kevin out of the house. The door closed behind them with a final, echoing click. Standing there, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief wash over me. I had lost something today, my last illusions about my mother. But I had gained something too, a clear sense of my path forward and the reassurance that I wasn't alone on it. "What now?" I asked, my voice muffled against Grandma's shoulder. She pulled back and gave me a small smile. "Now, we get back to celebrating your college acceptance. And tomorrow, we start planning for your future, your real future, not the one your mother tried to force on you. The morning after the confrontation with Mom and Kevin, I woke up to the sound of voices downstairs. Curious, I crept down the stairs and peeked into the living room. To my surprise, I saw Dad sitting on the couch, deep in conversation with Grandma. I sat down next to them, and Grandma explained why she'd called Dad over. "I've been thinking about Emma," she said. "Your mother, well, I'm not sure she's in the best position to care for her right now. I've suggested that your father seek custody of Emma." A surge of hope filled me. "Dad? Are you going to do it?" Dad ran a hand through his hair, looking both nervous and determined. "Yeah, I am. It won't be easy, but Emma deserves better than what she's getting right now." I couldn't help it. I threw my arms around him. "Thank you, Dad." As we pulled apart, Grandma cleared her throat. "There's more," she said. "I've hired a private investigator to look into your mother and Kevin's affairs." Over the next few weeks, life fell into a strange new rhythm. I started my college classes, throwing myself into my studies with a determination I never felt before. Dad came over regularly, and we worked on rebuilding our relationship. It felt good to have him back in my life. Then, about 3 weeks after that morning conversation, Grandma called us both over. Her face was grave as we sat down. "The investigator's report came in," she said without preamble, "and it's worse than we thought." She laid out the facts, each one hitting like a punch to the gut. Mom had been cheating on Dad for years, long before the divorce. Her affair with Kevin had started while she was still married to Dad. There were hotel receipts, records of expensive gifts, all painting a damning picture. But that wasn't even the worst of it. "Kevin is a con man," Grandma said, her voice hard. "He's done this before, seducing wealthy women, convincing them to move assets around, and then disappearing with the money." I felt sick. "So when they wanted to move the company's capital?" "Exactly," Grandma nodded. "He was planning to steal it and run." We sat in silence for a moment, each lost in our thoughts. Finally, Grandma said we needed to confront Mom with the truth. The meeting was set for the next day. When Mom arrived at Grandma's house, she looked annoyed and impatient. Her expression changed to surprise when she saw Dad there too. What followed was one of the most painful conversations I've ever been part of. Grandma laid out all the evidence: the affair, Kevin's history of fraud, and his plans to steal from the company. With each revelation, I watched my mother's face, hoping to see some sign of remorse or understanding. Instead, all I saw was denial. "This is ridiculous," Mom sputtered. "Kevin loves me. He would never. You're all just jealous of our happiness." "Dad," I tried to reason with her. "Teresa, please look at the evidence. Think about Emma. Is this the kind of man you want around our daughter?" But Mom wouldn't hear it. She stood up, her face flushed with anger. "I don't have to listen to this. Kevin is a good man, and I trust him completely. You're all just trying to ruin my life." With that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. As we sat there, I realized something. This wasn't the end, but just the beginning of a long, difficult battle. But looking at Dad and Grandma, I knew I wasn't facing it alone. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal battles and emotional turmoil. With Grandma's unwavering support and her lawyer's expertise, Dad filed for custody of Emma. I tried to stay focused on my studies, but it was hard not to get caught up in the drama unfolding around me. The day of the custody hearing arrived, and I insisted on being there. The proceedings were grueling. Mom's lawyers tried to paint Dad as an absent father, but our lawyer came prepared. He presented evidence of Dad's consistent alimony payments, his efforts to stay in touch with us, and the stability of his current living situation. Then came the bombshell: the private investigator's report on Kevin's fraudulent past and their plans to embezzle from the company. I watched Mom's face as the evidence was presented. She looked shocked, then angry, then lost for a moment. I almost felt sorry for her. When the judge announced his decision, granting Dad full custody of Emma, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that Emma would be safe, and sadness that it had come to this. As we left the courthouse with Emma in Dad's arms, Mom approached us, her eyes blazing with fury. This isn't over, she hissed. Grandma stepped between us. Yes, Teresa, it is. Go home. The headaches kept coming from Mom after that. The judge ordered her to pay child support to Dad for Emma. It was a reversal that shocked her. She'd always assumed she'd be the one receiving support, not paying it. I threw myself into my studies and learning about the company, trying to distance myself from the ongoing drama, but it was hard to ignore the satisfaction I felt when I heard that Kevin had left Mom, running off with another woman and a significant chunk of Mom's savings. It was a crisp autumn evening when Dad called me. His voice was tight with suppressed emotion. Your mother showed up at my place today, he said. She wanted to reconcile. She said she'd made a mistake and wanted us to be a family again. My heart clenched. Part of me, a small, childish part, wanted him to say yes, to get our family back the way it used to be. But I knew too much now. We'd all been through too much. I told her no, Dad said firmly. I told her that ship had sailed a long time ago and that I wouldn't put you or Emma through that again. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Good, I said, surprised by the strength in my voice. You deserve better, Dad. We all do. There was a pause, and when Dad spoke again, I could hear the smile in his voice. When did you get so wise, Melissa? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. I learned from the best. As I hung up the phone, I looked around my room at Grandma's house. My textbooks were spread out on the desk next to a stack of reports from the company. Photos of me with Dad and Emma smiled back at me from the bulletin board. This wasn't the life I'd imagined for myself a year ago. It wasn't perfect. There was still so much to figure out and so many challenges ahead, but it was real. It was mine. I thought about Mom, suddenly alone after all her scheming and manipulations. I felt a twinge of pity, but it was overshadowed by a sense of justice. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. As for me, I had a family that loved me, a company to run, and a future full of possibilities. It wasn't the path I'd expected, but standing at the threshold of my new life, I realized something important. Time flies when you're juggling college and a multi-million-dollar company. Before I knew it, I was halfway through my degree, buried in textbooks and financial reports. Weekdays were a blur of lectures and late-night study sessions, but weekends were sacred. Every Friday, I'd pack a bag and head home to Dad and Emma. Melissa, Emma would squeal, tackling me with a hug the moment I walked in. At 10, she was all gangly limbs and endless energy. Dad would emerge from the kitchen, usually wearing an apron, just in time for dinner. Dinner's ready, he'd say with a grin. Those weekends became my anchor. We'd eat together, Emma chattering about school, Dad and I discussing the company. After Emma went to bed, we'd often stay up late, poring over business strategies. Sundays usually found us at Grandma's, where she'd cook up a storm, filling the house with the smell of roast chicken and apple pie. After lunch, we'd sit on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. I always knew you had it in you, Melissa, Grandma would say, squeezing my hand. As graduation approached, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Dad was true to his word, running the company with skill while preparing me to take over. I'm ready to hand over the reins whenever you are, he told me one evening. I hugged him tight. Thank you, Dad, for everything. Life wasn't perfect. There were challenges ahead, decisions to be made, and a company to run. But as I looked at my little family, Dad, Emma, Grandma, I knew we could face anything together.